Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today for the current installment of the Network Visibility webinar series. For our webinar now, we have two industry experts to discuss securing ICS. Can IoT devices take your network down? In a moment, I'll introduce our speakers, but first, a quick word about the conference system we are using. You can easily zoom in and see the presentation slides larger with the control at the upper right corner. Also, we welcome your questions and comments in the Q&A box. At the conclusion, we invite you to complete a short feedback survey before you sign off. Our expert from Nozomi Networks is Phil Page, Technical Manager for Alliances. Phil helps customers and partners around the world secure industrial control networks. Prior to joining Nozomi, he worked as a network security consultant in the federal space, designing and deploying security solutions for the organizations in the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. Phil previously served as an engineer officer in the U.S. Army Reserve and earned his master's degree in information systems engineering from the Johns Hopkins University. Our expert from Keysight Technologies is Dennis Carpio, Senior Director, Business Development for ICS Solutions Group. Dennis has more than 20 years of industry experience in the network monitoring and security space. Dennis is responsible for technology partnership activities for ICS Exceed Alliance program. Dennis helped pioneer key technologies that have become best practices for building a formal network visibility architecture. When he joined NetOptics in 1996, Dennis introduced the concept of the first network tap for network monitoring. He also helped to develop the company's first network packet broker, which is a foundational technology used in many large enterprise deployments today. In a moment, you'll see for yourself how to gain real-time visibility across industrial control system environments to detect complex threats that can appear quickly or develop over time. After this webinar, you will know how to quickly improve security at power substations, oil and gas facilities, discrete manufacturing sites, and other remote locations. And now I'd like to introduce Dennis Carpio to start the discussion. Dennis?
Thank you for that, Andrew. Hello, everyone. This is Dennis Carpio from Keysight. I thought I'd start off by quickly introducing who Keysight is for those of you who might not be familiar. So our foundation and our company essentially got started over 80 years ago as Hewlett-Packard in Northern California. Over the years, HP has gone through some changes and acquisitions and divestitures, and essentially what happened is in 2014, the company was rebranded and Keysight Technologies was born. And so with Keysight Technologies, we've got squarely focused on the test and measurement industry. In 2017, we made the acquisition of Ixia, which essentially brought in additional testing capabilities as well as network monitoring capabilities. If you take a look at our portfolio today, the red area is essentially what you would consider Keysight Classic. Keysight's done an amazing job building a $3 billion business on test and measurement in the communication space, aerospace and defense, 5G wireless, and even IoT. And with the acquisition of Ixia, what we really did was we complemented the test capabilities by adding the layer 2 to layer 7 test coverage, as well as what we would consider network visibility or network applications and security. That last blue box is really where we're focused on when it comes to network monitoring and is essentially the focal point of our synergies in our partnership with Nozomi Networks. And so now with that, I'll hand it off to Phil to introduce Nozomi.
Thanks for that, Dennis. So yeah, a little bit about Nozomi. We were founded back in 2013 by two veterans in the industrial automation industry. Initially, the company was located in Mendrisio, Switzerland, but soon expanded around the world. Today, we have many customers scattered across all 6 continents with a global sales presence, as well as hundreds of customers worldwide, and which are monitoring millions of devices. So before we move on to talking about the products that we offer, I think it's best first to take a second and discuss what are we seeing in the way of threats as well as challenges in the industrial control system security space. So ICS security gets a lot of visibility in the news media due to some of the scary nation-state sponsored attacks. For example, the Stuxnet attack almost 12 years ago that took place. Alternatively, a number of attacks against various power grids in certain countries. However, it's more than just somebody turning off the lights. As we see here, there's a number of different manufacturing, transportation, and other entities around the world that have been hit by various different types of attacks, both targeted at IT and OT systems that have managed to affect their industrial control networks. If you look at the right-hand side of this chart right here, you can see that, again, it's more than just damage to reputation. We see that, in some cases, losses have totaled in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And this is not necessarily just coming out of a company's production targets, but actually really impacting their bottom line. So what's causing this increase in attacks against industrial control systems in IoT environments? Well, first of all, we've seen there's been a large number of devices connected to the internet now, as well as corporate networks that were not previously connected. In the IoT arena, or Internet of Things arena, we've seen there's been an explosion in the number of devices that are now online that were not previously online. In fact, we expect there will be 75 billion connected IoT devices within the next 5 years. Now, of course, there's been enormous benefits provided to customers as well as to the end users that are using these technologies. And so there's a big drive within organizations to automate a lot of processes and make sure that not only can we do things more efficiently on the manufacturing side, but we can also use information gathered during the manufacturing or automation process to better enhance our business processes. Unfortunately, most of these devices were not built very secure from the beginning. They lacked basic protections like secure authentication and encryption of their communications, or they were not properly hardened during the software design phase. And as such, it's very easy for hackers as well as random malware to find a way to exploit these devices, whether they're running on an embedded version of Linux or a version of Windows. Typically, these systems are not routinely updated, and nor are they protected from most of the attacks that are typically very easy to protect against in IT networks. And so what does all this mean for the end user? Well, first of all, we've seen an increase in the number and type of attacks targeting industrial control system and IIoT networks. This has had tremendous implications, not only for the resilience of these systems, but also for their uptime. And of course, we see that this can adversely impact both the safety of the personnel that are working on site, as well as the environment in case of a massive catastrophic failure of these systems. Now, in addition to all this, there's additional implications for the reputation of a company. For example, if a major shipping company takes an enormous hit to their capabilities to ship their customers' goods, that of course could impact their brand. Their customers may be less willing to do business with them in the future. It may also undermine confidence in the government. That's why there's enormous national security implications here, as well as a shift in the corporate responsibility model. So a lot of companies now are trying to do best by their shareholders, their employees, as well as the environment by implementing protection schemes for these industrial control systems. Beyond that, we've seen that a number of rating agencies, including Moody's, are now leveraging cyber risk in their credit scores for companies that want to issue debt. So there are tremendous financial implications that go alongside all of these other safety and reputational implications listed above. And so with all that being said, I'd like to hand it back over to Dennis to discuss some of the trends that we're seeing in the industrial IoT and ICS space. Dennis, over to you.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, in combination with this growth of devices and this growing threat landscape and attacks, I think the other obvious trend and why this is all coming together is this convergence between the IT and the OT environments. And, you know, essentially what this does is to an organization is the attack surface essentially grows as the network environment gets exposed to outside elements. And so this is really cause for a concern, and obviously there's a growing need to start to apply security best practices that were usually prevalent in the enterprise space and start to apply that those best practices into the OT industrial space. And, associated with the technology is obviously a growing need for security expertise within the OT community as well. So that's also driving the need for a lot of this change. So now let's transition from the challenges associated with securing your OT environment to how do we address these challenges and what solutions are in place to apply for your organization. We believe at Keysight that one of the first things you need to do is network visibility. At the end of the day, regardless of what security measures and what security monitoring practices you put in place, without the ability to collect data and network traffic from your environment, you really can't apply those security measures unless you have access to that data. So for us, network visibility is really the top priority. Here we take a general look at a diagram that represents the various different SCADA levels. We understand that there's a lot of differences and variances in the way that these architectures could be designed based on the subvertical that you're in, ranging from utilities to oil and gas, food and beverage, pharmaceuticals. But I think most people can agree in general premise that these are the different sections of the Purdue model. And when you take a look at this, there are most of the security tools that you'll deploy to monitor from a threat detection standpoint are going to be packet-based tools. So getting access to network traffic in the form of packets is critical for security monitoring operation in these types of environments. And when you take a look at it, there's some inherent challenges with what the infrastructure provides you from the standpoint of traffic mirroring. So span ports are available in some of these switches. However, in order for these switches to maintain performance and bandwidth capabilities, they sometimes drop a lot of errors associated. So you're not really getting a full picture from those types of network segments. In addition, some switches that are older legacy switches may not even have span port capabilities. So you're already rendered blind in those types of environments where they don't have that capability. And then lastly, they may already be a monitoring tool connected to the span port. So you're up against contention when it comes to deploying a security monitoring tool. You might be competing with something that's already monitoring that environment from a performance standpoint. So this is really an area of improvement in terms of deploying a more formal network visibility architecture. Rather than relying on span ports, one of the things that we propose is the use of what we call network taps. And network taps is basically a simplified hardware appliance that sits directly on the wire between two network elements. Here you look at a diagram sitting between a router and a firewall, but it really doesn't matter. It's agnostic to what devices you're connecting it in between. The basic premise of a network tap is that it allows direct connectivity between those two network elements while at the same time copying network traffic to a third-party monitoring device. And these taps are 100% passive. They'll never bring your network link down. And better than that, you have the ability to see 100% of all the traffic that's traversing across that physical wire. And you have the ability to deploy as many taps in the environment as you need. Now, the second part of what we propose is technology called network packet brokers. Essentially, what this does is it's a consolidation point and a collection point for you to leverage if you've got a multiple tap deployment in your environment. So what you can essentially do is take all the various different feeds from all the taps and bring them into one centralized data delivery platform called a network packet broker. And a lot of these packet brokers have some, nice features to be able to enhance the way that you monitor traffic in those types of environments. Number one, it brings that cost and flexibility down by being able to aggregate the feeds into one location versus deploying security devices across every single network segment, which isn't economic. Secondly, you have the ability to share the traffic among multiple tools. So you can deploy it alongside Nozomi Security Guardian platform, while at the same time, maybe you can send the traffic to a data recorder or data lake for auditing purposes for storing for later time. So there's a lot of different things you can do once the data has been collected. In addition, you've got the ability to apply filters to take traffic out of the monitoring stream, so that in case there's certain things you don't necessarily want to see, like CCTV traffic, you can take that data out so you don't overburden the tools with high amounts of network traffic to monitor. Here's a more consolidated look based on the use cases that we just discussed. As you can see, really the premise of aggregation can lend a huge value in terms of deploying a security tool in a much more optimum and low-cost fashion. And we really remove the dependencies on span ports by deploying these network taps across your entire environment. And the packet broker really provides that value to be able to establish that centralized location for monitoring from a security or performance standpoint. So rather than having a very distributed architecture, you have a very centralized architecture that's economic, and you have complete control of the data, and more importantly, 100% of the data. So as we take a look at what that might now look like in that same general Purdue model, what you're taking a look at here now is the deployment of that formalized visibility architecture alongside the Nozomi Guardian platform. So if you take a look at all the red segments, that's essentially the new visibility platform that we're proposing. In section 1, really, you can still leverage span ports if you choose to. So the great thing about the packet brokers is you have the ability to take in feeds from taps as well as span ports simultaneously. So in this case, if you still want to leverage span port capabilities in that level 1 section, you still can. But then you bring all that traffic up to the packet broker alongside tap traffic pre and post firewall in that level 3. And now you've established yourself that centralized visibility platform. And then you can control the data of who it goes to, what type of traffic you want to see, and then share that amongst the variety of different tools that you might be using. So this is essentially architecting yourself a form of visibility platform, and now you're set up to deploy Nozomi Guardian platform.
Thanks, Dennis. So now let's take a couple of minutes and talk about how Nozomi, together with Keysight, can help you secure your OT environment. So when we talk about industrial control systems, IoT, OT security, and security more generally, what are some of the things that we need to consider? Well, first of all, as we discussed a couple slides back, safety is the #1 priority in these environments. And with that comes also a heavy emphasis on availability. When we look at the CIA triad, in most IT networks, we're focused very much on the confidentiality and integrity of data. However, when we shift to OT networks, we're very interested in the availability of these systems, because they need to be able to run, in some cases, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every single day of the year. And of course, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, sometimes if a system fails, the lights can go out, the power can go out, people can freeze to death, right? Or critical supply chains may be disrupted. Now, we're dealing with a large number of legacy systems here, which are made by automation vendors. Typically, they're going to employ proprietary protocols that may not necessarily be detectable or readable by traditional IT devices. So you need to have the ability to understand those protocols and understand how the automation devices themselves are functioning. This requires a deep understanding of how these networks operate, and a lot of exposure to not only the automation vendors themselves, but the different types of networks you may find in different industry verticals. And finally, since all threats now are capable of attacking IT, OT, and IoT, because again, a lot of these systems leverage more traditional IT systems, you also need to be able to see across each different network. So you need to be able to see in IT, IoT, and OT. And so in order to address all of these different challenges and considerations, Nozomi Networks developed its Guardian platform. It does a lot of things. So far, we focused predominantly on visibility into networks, and that is a key component because, again, you cannot protect what you can't see. Establishing a good understanding of your OT network and your IoT network is really the first phase of providing a comprehensive OT security plan. With Nozomi Guardian, we can passively identify assets inside of an industrial control system or IoT network. Again, we're not necessarily going to be probing these devices with any sort of polling mechanism, or nor are we going to install an agent-based solution on top of them. Rather, we're going to analyze traffic given to us by a packet broker or a network tap, and we're going to analyze that to determine things like firmware versions, model numbers, even vulnerabilities that may be associated with specific software revisions. Once we have a solid foundation, a good understanding of our network, we can then detect when things may be going amiss, right? When things are not the way they should be. We call this our anomaly detection engine. If we see devices communicating that should not be communicating, if we see changes to the individual industrial processes themselves, people manipulating variable values, changing the function codes on programmable logic controllers, we can detect that too. And we combine this with a more traditional signature-based detection engine with curated signatures provided by our threat intelligence group. When we put these two solutions together, it gives you a comprehensive solution that's capable of detecting well-known threats and exploits and vulnerabilities, as well as novel zero-day attacks that maybe would otherwise go missed or unnoticed by a traditional signature-based intrusion detection system. That, of course, gives you plenty of time to respond to these threats, whether it's looking at the Nozomi platform itself or alternatively through one of your many different network security solutions, whether it's a SIM solution or a source solution. We integrate with many of the leading products on the marketplace. And finally, we already have a proven track record of doing this at massive scale. In some cases, deploying hundreds or almost, in some cases, thousands of different Nozomi devices to monitor some of the world's largest industrial control system networks. And so in addition to our flagship Guardian product, we have a couple of other solutions that are beneficial to our customers. First and foremost, we have an enterprise-level management console called the Central Management Console. This supports not only multi-tenancy for environments that may have sort of discontiguous networks, but also it supports a hierarchical management model. So you can have a manager of managers. In other words, if you have regional divisions or if you have local divisions, you can have each of these aggregating and managing localized Guardian appliances, and then have a top-level or global management console managing those managers. Now, I need to stress, all of the intelligence is built into the Guardian platform. So we're not doing any sort of correlation. We're not sending any sort of information upstream for additional processing. All the intelligence is taking place there at the edge. But the CMC is very useful for updating information on appliances, updating firmware versions, as well as updating signatures. And of course, it aggregates and disseminates information to enterprise systems. Now, beyond this, we have a couple of different services that customers may benefit from as well. I've already alluded to our threat intelligence service. Our threat intelligence service consists of our Nozomi Labs team sitting in Mendrisio, Switzerland. Their primary function is to enhance the security of the global OT community by providing information to US CERT through collaborative research projects. So they sit there and they hack at PLCs and HMIs all day. And when they detect some sort of vulnerability, they submit that not only to the vendor, of course, but eventually they will publish it to US CERT. But beyond providing information on vulnerabilities that previously were undisclosed, they also curate signatures in the form of snort rules, YARA rules, and STIX indicators, and publish them as part of our OT threat feed or threat intelligence service. Now, we also have a brand new service called our Asset Intelligence Service. This is slightly different than our Threat Intelligence Service. The Asset Intelligence Service focuses on how devices behave. By partnering with automation vendors, as well as with many of our customers around the world, we developed unique behavioral profiles for devices on the network. And again, this could be a controller, it could be an HMI, or it could be a workstation running software. Because we have such a large user base at this point, we are able to easily identify devices on a very fast basis and determine how should they be behaving. Traditionally, this took a long time of learning about a device using our anomaly detection engine. But now with our Asset Intelligence Service, we can speed that up, further reducing the false positive rate, and also, again, speeding up the actual time to learn about a device's behavior. Now, finally, we have two other products that may be good for a customer depending upon their environment. The first one on the right-hand side is smart polling. I mentioned previously that Guardian is a purely passive product. However, we do have the ability to supplement its passive detection and analysis capabilities with something called smart polling. Smart polling allows us to use things like WinRM or WMI or SNMP to probe certain devices and extract information, things like hot fixes, things like different firmware versions of network switches that maybe aren't using LLDP or something like that. And so again, it allows us to supplement what we already have through our passive detection approach. Finally, remote collectors allow us to extend visibility further into a network, into areas where it may be cost prohibitive to deploy a full-fledged Guardian product. And when used in concert with Keysight's various network taps and packet broker solutions, it allows a customer to expand their visibility on a very cost-effective basis. And so just to tie it all off, right, Nozomi, as we partner with Keysight, first of all, we're going to be delivering true OT and IoT visibility. If you're lacking visibility right now, if you don't have good documentation for your IoT or OT networks, please reach out to us. We can definitely help you get a better understanding as to how these networks are operating. Of course, we're also going to provide that level of anomaly detection and threat detection that you may be lacking right now inside of the environment. We integrate with all of the leading IT SIM solutions out there, as well as many different firewall vendors, network access control solutions. We have a global partner ecosystem capable of not only reselling, but also delivering both of our solutions together. And of course, we've already proven that we scale to very large environments, but also we make sure that we can work in the smallest of environments too. All right, thanks a lot, Dennis. Back over to you.
All right, thanks, Phil. So as we close out and we kind of bring it all together, I think one of the questions you might have is what is really the true value of combining the Nozomi and the Keysight solution together? And I think that combining both companies' solutions together really tells a better together story because one technology really complements the other. I think that when it comes to establishing a proper visibility architecture in your OT environment, what you're really able to do is gain access to the data in real time in a much more complete fashion, which would allow you to identify and detect devices much quicker and more accurately, therefore possibly leading to potential threats that could happen in your environment. I think that the combined solution also yields a scalable solution that will future-proof your investment as your network continues to grow. Our ability to scale with it will be right there, and the impact to the environment is really very little to nothing. So your environment will continue to perform at an optimum level while now having the visibility to monitor from a security threat standpoint. And so Nozomi and Keysight have several dozen joint deployments already together worldwide from utilities companies, oil and gas, pharmaceutical, food and beverage, transportation. So we know that the joint solution is proven, and we're certain that it will help your organization meet your security needs in the future. So to make some of this information much easier, we put together some collateral that will hopefully make the education and understanding of these details for your organization a little bit easier. Some of the things that we put together here are deployment guides on how to essentially deploy both the Nozomi and the Keysight solution. We have solution briefs that highlight what our joint solution looks like, white papers on industrial IoT. We even have the press release announcing our partnership several months ago. So I think that you'll find a lot of these key resources very helpful. In the event that you want additional information beyond the resources that we were made available, you're always free to reach out to myself or to Phil. Here's our contact information listed. We're happy to provide any additional details that you might need or go through a reference design or an architecture to see how something would look like in your environment. And so please feel free to reach out to us with any questions or additional details that you might need. And so now I'll hand it back over to Andrew for any Q&A.
You bet. You know, we're just about out of time, but we do have time for a few questions. And as a reminder, please enter questions in the Q&A box on your screen. If we don't get to your question in the broadcast, we'll follow up by email. I see we have some questions already lined up, and the first one is, how scalable is this combined solution? Can you quantify it by number of devices, nodes, segments?
Sure, maybe I can take a first stab at that and then add on to Phil. Essentially, from our standpoint, our taps and packet brokers can operate at 10, 100, or 1 meg speeds. And, instances that we've seen in environments typically don't exceed a level of 1 gig per site, but there are exceptions to the rules. So a lot of our appliances and the taps you can certainly aggregate anywhere from 6 to a dozen taps into one packet broker and send that traffic off to Nozomi, and you'll still have plenty of performance overhead to compensate.
Yeah, and the great thing about leveraging the packet broker architecture, of course, is that, because it performs deduplication and some other functions, we can filter out a lot of excessive noise we would typically get in a standard Guardian deployment scenario if we were just monitoring span ports. So it allows us on the Nozomi side to scale up to a much larger degree and a much more cost-effective basis, because you can consolidate a large number of feeds from individual taps down to just a very small number of Nozomi appliances. They'll be more powerful, but again, you're not going to have to go out and deploy as many of them. So it's going to save you, of course, hardware costs, but also implementation costs from a manpower perspective. So yeah, actually great solution for scaling up to very large environments.
Good, very good. The next question I see is, my company acquired 3 water utilities in the past year. One of them is fairly remote. How can this solution help me gain a unified view of everything?
Sure. I think just purely from a tap infrastructure visibility standpoint, many of our appliances are designed to work within edge sites, remote branch offices, and very distributed type environments. We have the ability, if you choose, to have on-site monitoring at each location, but we also have the ability to backhaul traffic out from one location to another for a more consolidated view. But at the end of the day, if you maintain a very distributed environment, we have management solutions that will give you essentially a single pane of glass view across the various different taps and packet brokers you have across your environment, whether they're on-premise or very distributed.
Yeah, and on the Nozomi side, whether you're deploying it kind of a centralized solution and backhauling traffic to it, kind of like Dennis just mentioned, or if you're actually deploying it in Guardian Appliance at the edge, right? As I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, we do all of our traffic processing on our edge appliances. We don't need to send anything back to our management console. So if you're deploying this in concert with the Keysight solution, one of the great benefits is that we're going to process and crunch all that data out there at the edge. So all we need to send back across that WAN link is going to be metadata. It's going to be very, very small compared to if we were sending back, full packets there. So if you're worried about, maybe having a metered connection or a very low bandwidth WAN link, we can certainly support that. Again, the idea is we're not going to require tons and tons of traffic for analysis. So again, another way we can kind of join forces there and limit the amount of traffic we're going to send across that WAN link.
That sounds great. We have time for just one more question. Here it is. I heard you say that one benefit was filtering unneeded traffic such as CCTV. Is this a default setting or something I can configure?
Yeah, so that's absolutely something you can configure. We have, the packet brokers have functionality to basically configure a variety of different filters from, source and destination IP protocols and things like that. So you have absolutely 100% control over what gets monitored and what gets filtered out. So CCTV traffic just happens to be one of those that we see that's sometimes prevalent that customers don't necessarily need to see. But in the enterprise IT environment, we have experience in doing advanced filters all the way from deduplication and SSL. But in these OT environments, we've seen traditionally basic filters can provide enough benefit for your monitoring operation.
Yeah, and on the Nozomi side, we obviously can leverage some filters to prevent that traffic from getting in there. But honestly, if you're running a Keysight packet broker situation, that's a much better way of handling this than having to wait until it gets to the appliance. So I would, if you're looking at the Keysight benefits, I think that as Dennis mentioned, the ability to put in those advanced filters to get rid of things like CCTV traffic, best done on the packet broker appliance. But again, we can always handle it too on the Guardian appliance if that's required.
Sounds good. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it here. Thank you for everyone who submitted a question. If we did not answer your question during this broadcast, we will answer it via email after the event. On behalf of everyone at Keysight Technologies and Nozomi Networks, thank you for participating in this webinar. You can request more information using the feedback survey, and you can always find out more about Keysight Technologies on the web at ixia.keysight.com and Nozomi Networks at nozominetworks.com. We'll be with you again for the next webinar in the series and always online. Thank you and goodbye for now.